This is Josh White, JW Math Tutoring. In today's video, I'm going to go through everything you need to know to study for the digital SAT math section before you begin studying, including tons of free resources and practice problems. So let's go ahead and get right to it.
But life is a dream that calculus could never predict.
Before I begin going through this digital SAT math primer or explainer video, I just want to mention a couple things. First, this is an updated version of the same video that I had released last year in 2024. So there are going to be a couple parts at the beginning that are just going to be the same information that was in the previous video, but basically everything from like slide 4 on will be new, will be updated, for 2025 with the changes that have been made to the Bluebook Practice Tests and so on and so forth. Okay, and the second thing is, this is basically a video that is summarizing or sharing information about where to get free resources to study for the digital SAT math section. Okay, and basically, it's what you should know, what you should be aware of before you begin studying for the math section of the digital SAT. It is not going to cover any specific math content. Okay, it's not going to go through math problems. It's not going to go through concepts. It's not going to go through, um, you know, techniques or any of that stuff. Those are all in separate videos. This is just kind of a basic, like I said, a primer for the digital SAT math section for, say, someone who is starting out studying from scratch and knows very little or could know nothing, about how to study or where to study. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Bluebook app. So the Bluebook app is what you use to take the digital SAT exam. It's installed on either a laptop, uh, Mac, or Windows, an iPad, or it can also be done on a Chromebook. However, it can only be installed on school-issued Chromebooks. You cannot install the Bluebook app on your personal Chromebook. So just keep that in mind. You can see basically a screenshot, of what the sign-in screen looks like in the bottom corner here. Now, if you don't have a device to take the digital SAT exam, you can request to borrow one from the College Board when you register or sign up for your test date. You just have to make sure you choose or select that option again during the registration process. Then, what you're going to do is, you load the Bluebook app. You are going to sign in either using your College Board student account or the top thing, the sign-in ticket from your school. That's typically for if you're taking a school day, exam at your school. And then from there, you can either, if you're taking an official test, you can go ahead, and load the official test and complete that. Or also the Bluebook app is used to take practice tests, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. A couple things to keep in mind. So the Desmos calculator is built into the math modules, both of them on the new digital SAT. I'll talk more about the Desmos calculator, a little bit later in this video. One thing to mention too is that if you are practicing outside of Bluebook, so you're just doing like, problems from the linear paper tests, or the Skills Insight tool, or from the question bank, there is a version of the Desmos graphing calculator on the Desmos website, which is basically identical to the version you find in the Bluebook app. The address is listed there on the screen. It'll also, all these, the web links, these addresses will be listed in the description of the video as well. But that's the version you want to use. You don't just want to go to desmos.com/calculator because that is not exactly the same as the version of Desmos you'll find in the Bluebook app. Okay, so please do keep that in mind. Now, inside the Bluebook app, as you're going through and completing a test, you can cross out or eliminate some of the answer choices as you're working on a problem. You can also annotate text. That doesn't really apply so much probably to the math section, but more for reading and writing. You can zoom in and zoom out, and I have the controls down there, at least on a Windows PC, on how to do that. You can also mark or flag kind of questions for review to come back on. There's also a countdown timer, which shows you how much time you have left. And Also, I have the instructions on the screen here on how to go back to a default zoom. So one thing I just want to mention, the reason I listed zoom in and zoom out and default zoom here as commands, just to be familiar with, is because there are some problems where, because the answer choices are graphs, like you can't see the question and all four answer choices at the same time. So if you do not zoom out, to try to fit everything on the screen, then you have to constantly like scroll up and scroll down, especially if you're going through the process of elimination to try to match and see, okay, which of these graphs has a y-intercept of 4? Which of these has a slope of -2 or whatever you're looking for. So zoom in and zoom out can be helpful on, maybe one or two questions where you can't see all the answer choices just from like the default zoom level. Now, let's talk about the setup of the math sections for the test. So basically, you have two modules. Each module has 22 questions, and you have 35 minutes to complete each of those modules. So in total, you're looking at 70 minutes for 44 questions. That comes out to about 95 seconds per question on average. So you have a little bit more than a minute and 30 seconds. Now, the digital SAT is section adaptive. And so what that means is the performance or your score on module 1 will determine, which bank of questions you get for the second module. Basically, there are two options, either an easy module, which I call 2A, or a hard module, which I refer to as 2B. So if you do well on the first module, then you get the hard module. If you do, you could say not well or poorly on the first module, then you get the easier of the 2 second modules. And again, as I mentioned, both modules, both sections allow you to use a calculator throughout the entire test, whether it's the Desmos onboard calculator or an approved handheld calculator. I mean, they still have the same restrictions and rules in terms of handheld calculators, so just be aware of that. But you can bring a handheld calculator to use in addition to or in place of the Desmos calculator. Now, in terms of the scoring, basically the digital SAT is scored using something called item response theory. And so what happens is the questions are graded or scored differently based on a variety of factors. And one of the most important ones is the difficulty level. So on the paper-based SAT, essentially each question was worth 1 point. And however many, and then you just add up your total, and that gets converted into whatever your score is. So each question is essentially kind of worth the same, but that is not the case here. If you miss what they determine to be easy questions, then you lose more points off your score. If you miss what College Board labels as hard questions, then you lose fewer points off your score. Okay. So do keep that in mind, because if you are doing the practice tests, you might see scores that don't quite make sense because maybe you missed more questions on one practice test but compared to another one, but you got a higher overall score. The reason that's happening is because of the breakdown for the specific questions that you missed. Now, another thing to keep in mind too is that basically, if you get the easier of the 2 second modules, what I call module 2A, essentially the maximum that you can get or that you can score, even if you got every single question correct on that the second module, is somewhere around like a 590, maybe a 600. And that kind of overlaps with the low end or the minimum you could get if you end up getting the harder module or module 2B. So in other words, even if you do well enough on the first module so that you get presented with the harder second module, even if you do very, very, very poorly on it, your score is still going to be like very close to the maximum score you could earn from, module 2A. So a lot of people are thinking about, have like mentioned or talked about, doing poorly intentionally on the first module so they get the easier second module, but it turns out that it doesn't really, that will not cause you to get a higher score necessarily, because the min from module 2B is right around in the same ballpark as the maximum you can get for module 2A. Now, within a module of the 22 questions, usually there's like 16 to 17 which are multiple choice, and then 5 or 6 which are free response. So You can, of course, on the multiple choice, you can use techniques, stuff like back solving, picking numbers. I talk about that those in separate videos and other videos. So please, go check those out if you're looking for videos related to strategy and so on. This video again is just kind of like a background informational video, not getting into actual math content and not really getting into strategy either. And just the last thing, of course, this is different than a maybe a typical math test you might take in school because at least for the multiple choice questions, there is no partial credit. It's either right or it's wrong, and one of the answers is provided there. So the main place they're going to start to find practice questions is obviously going to be the Bluebook app. It currently contains 7 digital SAT practice tests. They're numbered practice tests 4 through 10, and also 4 PSAT practice tests. There's 2 each for basically 8/9, and then for grade 10. And those are just numbered 1 and 2. Now, once you complete a practice test, the scoring and the answers and explanations are found on the mypractice.collegeboard.org website. So you just basically there's a link at the end of the test. You click on that, and then it'll take you to that website. You sign in with your College Board account, and then you can see the results from all your practice tests. You can click on them. It'll show your answer and the correct answer, and you can also click and get the explanations. Now, for the math, these explanations are typically just the traditional way, and they can oftentimes be very complicated, difficult to understand, or not the quickest, easiest way to solve a problem because they don't use techniques. They also never use Desmos operations or Desmos methods. So instead, you should go to YouTube and you should look for better, easier to understand explanations for any questions that you miss there, including how to use Desmos. So obviously, check out my channel. I've got solutions to all the modules for every Bluebook practice test for the SAT. I don't have the PSAT up, but for the SAT. But if not, there's plenty of other channels out there as well that you can find the solutions for. Also, it does not tell you the domain and skill for each question, for maybe a question that you missed on the Bluebook practice test. So the domain are the 4 overall areas like algebra, geometry and trig, problem solving and data analysis, and advanced math. And the skills are the more specific kind of groups or topics underneath each of those. So there are PDF files that I've made. Basically, it's from data that another tutor had grabbed from the question bank, College Board question bank, and these PDFs have every question from Bluebook Practice Tests 4 through 10, classified with the domain and the skill. Okay, so just keep in mind you'll want to look there if you want to see, okay, I missed this question, like what domain is this under, what specific skill is this under, that you need to practice. And there's a link here on the screen, and obviously it'll be in the description of the video. Now, another thing to keep in mind is you can skip sections when you're doing a practice test in Bluebook. In other words, you could take only the reading and writing or only the math sections. You just basically go to the last question, module starts, you go to the last question of the module, you choose next, and then your review page, and then it'll send you to the next module. And then for the second module, you just do the same thing, and then you can go ahead and it'll then either end your exam if you're skipping the math, or if you're skipping the reading writing, it'll send you to like the 10-minute break period before you start the math. You can also do the same thing to access the easier of the 2 second modules. So for example, if you took the practice test already and you got the harder second module, if you want to get the questions from the easier one, you just restart the practice test, go to the module 1, say of the math, but don't answer anything. Just leave everything blank. Everything will be essentially graded as incorrect. Skip it following these instructions, and then that'll route you to the easier, second module. However, you should use these tests wisely since there are, only 7 of them in total. Now, there are also linear non-adaptive paper practice tests as well. And these kind of mirror the Bluebook practice tests in that there's the same number of each. There's 7 of these linear paper SAT practice tests, and for PSAT practice tests, 2 for each of the different grade levels. However, these don't have adaptive modules, because they're on paper. They're just two fixed modules, and they're each a little bit longer with 27 questions instead of the 22, in the Bluebook format. Now, these tests are also scored just like the old, paper SAT, where basically each question is worth the same amount. However, at the end, if you actually take a full one and score it, you end up getting a range that corresponds to the number you got correct. So it's not an exact value or an exact number like the Bluebook app does. Now, where these are primarily going to be useful is for the unique questions that appear in them. And so what I mean by that is most of the questions on these linear paper practice tests overlap with the Bluebook app. If you look at the math sections and specifically, there are 96 unique questions in the linear paper practice tests out of 378 total across the 7 tests. So that means roughly a quarter, or 25% of the questions on these tests are unique, i.e. do not appear in the Bluebook practice tests. But on the other hand, that means that about almost 75%, 3 out of every 4 questions, are not unique. In other words, they are duplicates that also appear on the Bluebook practice tests. So obviously my recommendation is to complete all of the Bluebook practice tests in full and use those, to kind of test yourself and gauge your score, and then just use the unique questions from the paper tests, to supplement more practice. So if you want to find out the which specific questions on all these tests, and that should say 7, by the way, not 6, because there were 6 tests, but it's been updated, so that should say 7 at the bottom there. If you want to find out which specific questions on all 7 of these paper tests are the unique ones, then there's a link there basically in Reddit post, and you go to that Reddit post, there's PDF files that you can click on, and it'll show you on each specific linear paper practice test the unique question. So to say, module 1, 22, module 1, 27, module 2, 5, module 2, whatever, okay? So that's how you can find which questions are the specific unique ones, that you want to complete. Now, there's also something called the College Board Skills Insight tool. This is basically just 14 questions in each of the domains. So it's like basically 56 practice problems. But the thing that is unique about these is that even though these questions are in the question bank, they are separated by score band. So there's 2 questions in each score band, and the score bands start, at the very bottom. I think it's in like the 300s, and they go all the way up to the top. It's like 740 to 800 or 710 to 800, I forget. But the point is, rather than the question bank, which we'll talk about coming up, which only has questions classified as easy, medium, or hard, these are actually narrowed down to more specific score levels. So this gives you an idea of like, what are the hardest questions, what are the very easiest questions, which are the ones that are, say, in the middle, in medium. Specifically medium level difficulty, where for say a 500 versus a 550 versus a 600 level question. So you can either access these via the Google Drive link that's listed there. It's a PDF file. It's put together by another tutor, not by myself. Or you can just access them on the web as well on the College Board's website. Now, I recommend using the PDF and not the website, because if you go to the website, you open a question, the answer shows immediately under it. Okay, so immediately after you expand one of the questions, you'll see the answer and the explanation immediately under it. It's stupid, to be honest, but that's why I prefer doing, if you want to do these, using the PDF files. All right, so now let's talk about the question bank. I already mentioned this already, but basically this is just a bunch of practice questions, again, across all 4 domains. And they have them in various difficulty levels. There's easy and medium and hard. And it's basically just, a repository of questions to practice with. Now, the question bank, though, it includes all the questions from essentially the Bluebook and linear paper practice tests 4 through 6. The questions from practice test 7 through 10 which were reused from practice test 1 through 3, because basically when they retired 1 through 3, they added 7 through 10, but only 7 is completely brand new. 8 through 10 reused questions, a lot of them from 1 through 3. So the reused questions are in the question bank. The quote-unquote the new questions on a Bluebook or linear paper practice test 7 through 10 are not in the question bank, as of now, March 2025. So you want to make sure if you're working off the question bank that you check the filter for exclude active questions. That will make sure you do not do Bluebook or linear paper practice test questions by mistake, because you don't want to do these questions ahead of time, because then when you go to do a Bluebook exam, if there's questions there that you've already seen, it would not give you an accurate, representation of your score. You can see the website listed on the screen there. Again, that'll be in the description of the video. There's currently over 500 total unique questions across, all 4 of the domains. But again, just like the Bluebook practice test, the explanations are typically done the traditional way, and they can be complicated, difficult to follow, not easy to understand, and generally not using techniques or not using Desmos at all. Now, one thing to be aware of is, though, that there are several alternate locations that basically mirror or pull the same data from the question bank, but with added functionality. So one of them is listed there at first. It's OnePrep. Then there's that one you do have to create an account to access, but it does allow you to track your progress. Then there's another one below that, just satquestionbank.org. That one you do not need an account. I do not know if there's any way to track your progress, but that one does include like an integrated Desmos window on the side. It's basically the web version of Desmos that's designed for College Board or AP exams. So if you don't like the format of the College Board question bank, which is really just like, PDF files or clicking on one question at a time or whatever, you can check out these alternate sites as well. Now, something else to keep in mind for study resources. Let me just relocate the video here. 1 second. Okay, so if you're looking for, again, more resources, more practice problems, I would highly recommend you check out the official test problem set worksheets that I've been putting together and making after each official exam. So each worksheet has anywhere from 10 to 11 essentially self-reported problems from official SAT exams, each month when they are offered. So what that means is I go through Reddit, I grab what people have self-reported, then I put those questions together, make a PDF file, and usually I can get anywhere from 30 to 40 problems total for a month whenever there's an official test date. And although there's a lot of common topics that come up, like quadratics, for example, I usually try to get as many different topics as possible. And then on YouTube, of course, I post the full solutions and explanations to these various worksheets. So the original one I did in May, I think only had like 10 or 11 questions. This is May 2024. And then June had 20 or 21 questions. And then ever since then, so starting with August 2024, there's been at least 30, or this most recent one, there were 40 total problems that I found from, self-reported from an official exam. So this is from March 2025. And then I go through in detail on YouTube, showing you all the different ways you can solve the problems. Okay, so it could be the traditional way, could be using techniques. Of course, Desmos as much as possible or whenever possible. There's the address for the plays on the screen. Obviously, you're not going to memorize that, so check the description of the video for that. Or, of course, you can just go to my channel on YouTube and, find it linked there as well. Now, some other resources, if you want additional practice problems, are going to be these excellent worksheets made by another fellow tutor, Tutorllini. His name is Kyle Terracciano. And he's created basically some practice worksheets, and he also uploads the video explanations for the problems. And there's basically two different groups. So the Ottocento worksheets are basically 10 to 20 problems on a single topic, usually of easy to medium level difficulty. Um, and the videos that go over the answers have instruction on the topic at the beginning. It's anywhere from like the first 20 to 45 minutes of the video are basically just straight instruction of the topic, and then you can complete the practice problems and then go back and check your answers. So there's a link there to where you can download those PDF worksheets. And then also there's a second thing for the problem set worksheets. These are essentially 7 hard, very difficult problems that cover, again, they're across various topics. And these are typically released before every official test date. So there aren't as many of these, but generally before each official exam, he'll release, like I said, one PDF worksheet with these 7 problems. So again, there's another Google Drive link there, which will be in the description of the video. Next, let's talk about Desmos a little bit. So the Desmos graphing calculator, is now built into the Bluebook app for any type of calculations, functions, graphing, and it can solve many of the problems on the digital SAT math section in a quicker and more efficient manner than, say, doing it the traditional way or by hand. Obviously, not all of them, but still a fair number of them. So when it comes down to trying to familiarize yourself with Desmos or learn Desmos, obviously the first thing I would recommend is my Ultimate Desmos Guide to Digital SAT Math course. Basically there are over 3.5 hours of instruction. Currently, I think spread across 8 videos, which covers just the basic introduction to Desmos, then your core skills, your intermediate skills, advanced Desmos skills, especially anything related to regression, the types of problems that you absolutely should and should not use Desmos for, and then it's still updated with additional tips and tricks, that I've come across or am using a lot as I find them. It also includes a PDF worksheet with 45 practice problems, basically that you do, as you go through the video guide. Essentially, the video guide, I'm going through those 45 practice problems. Again, the playlist is on the screen there. Don't expect you to memorize this, of course. So check the description of the video or check my YouTube, channel page as well. Now, if you're looking for other options to familiarize yourself with Desmos, of course, the same tutor I previously mentioned, Tutorllini, has a Desmos playlist as well. It's currently up to 22 videos. Just be aware that the first 15 videos include some problems from Bluebook Practice Test 4. They also included problems from Practice Test 1 through 3, but again, those have been retired. And I know that they reuse some questions, but I'm not so concerned about, about that. But they do have some problems from Practice Test 4, so just be aware of that. But everything from 16 on does not use Bluebook problems. Another great resource, and this is again something I use with my students as well, is Dr. Ella Sharma's book, Desmos Graphing Calculator Digital SAT Prep. You can get it on Amazon either in PDF format or in hard copy. And it generally doesn't cover the most advanced or most difficult features in Desmos, but it is a great foundation for learning and practicing the core skills and the intermediate skills for sure. And then lastly, of course, you can check out the official Desmos thread in the SAT subreddit. On Reddit, there's tons of things listed there, as well. All right, so let's just go through a brief conclusion of all the, free resources that are out there and available to practice with. So you've got the Bluebook practice tests, of course. Now, if you're only doing 2 modules or if you're going to do all 3 modules, there's a lot more questions that you have access to. But even at a minimum, if you're only doing 2 modules, it's still, over 300 total questions to complete among those. Then you have the linear non-adaptive paper tests. As I mentioned earlier, there's 96 total unique questions among all of those. You have the Skills Insight tool, which again, it is part of the question bank as well. But if you want to count those as separate, there's 56 problems there, basically 14 problems for each domain, and there's 4 domains. Then you also have the question bank itself, which I've talked about. You have the official test, self-reported exam problem worksheets, that I make every month. There's an official test. There's currently at least minimum, of 180 problems going back to, last year. And then you have the two things, again, mentioned from one of the other tutors, Tutorllini, the Ottocento worksheets and the problem set worksheets. And the problem set worksheets, there are 11 of those currently, 7 total problems each. The Ottocento, I did have a count originally from back when there were only like 19 or 20, but I haven't bothered to add them up. But at a bare minimum, there's at least 220, total problems across all those. So there's plenty, as you can see, plenty of free resources and practice problems that you can access. Now, and to get explanations for problems or solutions, for example, for problems that, from the College Board where their solutions are not particularly useful or easy to follow, of course, you have places like YouTube or the SAT subreddit, or there's Discord servers, or so on, or other places as well to check for those. Also, if you need practice on just kind of basic skill things like factoring or solving a specific type of equation or 30, 60, 90 right triangles, you can search online. Kuta Software has a bunch of worksheets, algebra-related worksheets. You can go to Edia, I don't know how it's pronounced, .app, and you can look at their worksheets. They have a bunch of practice problems for various high school math courses, broken down all by topic, and then with the answers and everything available. So those would mainly be for if you want skill practice on a specific, concept or a specific skill. All right. So with all that being said, I hope you liked this video. Hope you learned something from this video. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts, please do leave them below. Otherwise, if you did like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel and sign up for notifications. And check out all the other digital SAT math related content that you can find on my channel. Answers to the Bluebook Practice Tests, answers to the linear non-adaptive paper test, unique questions. Like I said, the official test, self-reported, exam problem worksheets. Desmos hacks, which is basically just some select problems from the Bluebook Practice Test, showing you how to use Desmos to solve them. And of course, the ultimate Desmos guide to digital SAT math that I mentioned previously. So please be sure to check that out, and good luck with your journey on studying for the digital SAT math section.